It is exactly the same for process management. The first few days, weeks, months is going to hurt. It is going to hurt. It is like going to the gym or going to start running. If it is not hurting, you are not doing it right.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. If you've been following the series for some time, you'll know that we bring many different guests onto the show to talk about all different perspectives on process management, how an organization can adopt this management technique or approach, understand and manage their business processes to deliver significant value to the organization. Today, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Anshuman Tiwari. Now, Anshuman is the Global Head of Delivery Excellence at DXC Technology. So not a small role in any sense of the word, but I'm very excited for this conversation. Anshuman, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Daniel. And I'm super happy to be here with you. Your show is absolutely a delight to watch. And I gather there are more than 100 shows now. So it's an honor to be in that list. And some of them are truly world-class setup. So thanks much for the invite. And I'm glad we are able to speak after some hiccups in trying to schedule this. So
Absolutely.
that's one case. But yeah, all good.
That's great.
Looking forward to the interview or your questions.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, one question that the audience of the Process Pioneers series likes to understand before we jump into the meatier questions is what's your background? How did you get started in the process world? Is it something that you stumbled into, or did you have formal education? Take us on a bit of a journey from when you jumped into the process world and leading up to what you're doing today.
Oh, sure. It will be a long journey, but I'll summarize it for you. I've been working for a long time, almost 25 plus years, more than that. Started working in 1994. Unlike many people in process management, actually, I have a qualification. So I am an industrial engineer by qualification, which is the closest you get to a process manager,
Right.
So my graduation is in industrial engineering from a university in India. And I was very fascinated very early on with simple things like the 7QC tools, brainstorming, flow diagram, these kind of things. During college days itself, I was very fascinated. And I decided that I will pursue that line a little bit. Wasn't sure if it will get me a job, but it did. So it started well. My first job was with a textile company in mostly doing industrial engineering investigative projects. So investigative as in not criminal investigation, but productivity investigation. So That was the term I coined there because a small team of 2 or 3 industrial engineers looked at how can we improve the productivity of one production area? How can we reduce losses in another? There are other kinds of wastes. Can we do that? So before the term lean became very popular, before the concept became popular, or at least I got to know of them, I was actually practicing some of that. So, which for me, it was just using the knowledge I had gained in graduation as an industrial engineer. I was trying to bring it to an industry. Later on, I realized that the field is called process management or process improvement. So to disappoint you a little bit, there was no romantic approach to process management. It just happened. Whatever I was doing became process management for me. And then, after a brief stint with this textile company, I worked for a short period with a Japanese auto component company as well. So again, my exposure to the Japanese process management methods was accidental. Right? So the only choice I made is that I wanted to stay in the field of quality, and the rest of it is accidental. After that, I did my MBA and moved into consulting, joined a small consulting firm. And much of their work was based on Dr. James Duran's process management approach. So again, as coincidence, you can say, or you can say, I can now say that I planned it that way. But actually, it was pretty much of a one coincidence leading to another, and you build on what you get. So much of their work was process management. So I worked with cement companies, fertilizer companies, textile companies because of my prior experience with textile, and a bunch of this. And then, as in the early 2000s, when the world started to become a little bit more service oriented, we started getting service management clients like airline, hospitals, corporate education centers, and so on. So I looked at their process end to end, and most of my clients, my work was to map their process, identify issues, and then find countermeasures, which later on I found was the A3 method of process improvement.
Right.
So some of these things you do, and then later on find that there are actually official names for some of those things.
Right.
I then moved on to an IT company in 2006, from where I ran the Baldrige program, again process management. The Malcolm Baldrige program of the US was being implemented in this organization internally. I then moved to a banking process company. You should be familiar, ANZ. So ANZ's operations in India, I was the head of process management, you can say. So from deploying processes to compliance to improving processes, that is where I got this whole concept of you plan a process, you control the process, and then you improve the process, which is a simpler version of the PDCA of Deming or other such concepts. And this is also where I got to understand War Room, or what later on is now popular as the Oboya concept in process management. So I did that in 2012 without knowing what it is called. We just took over a room and made it a project room. So yeah, so one coincidence, some deliberate intention leading one to another, then had a stint with HSBC in process improvement roles. So then similar stints with EY, and of course the IT one that I forgot to mention was Infosys. So across industry, I had some experience in implementing quality and process management. And one choice I made, Dan, is that I stayed in that space. Of course, in a long career, you have some choice at times to shift. But I thought that there was a lot to learn and a lot to do in this space, and I decided to stay consciously in that space. And that's what brought me to DXC. And at DXC, again, half of my role is pretty much, understanding processes, making sure that processes can be deployed, and we comply to those processes. And every now and then we look at improving those processes. So that, in a nutshell, is my journey. Along the way, I became very involved with the American Society for Quality. Was elected a fellow with them in 2013, which is a long way back. But yeah, that gives you some joy that your work is recognized in the space.
Yeah.
So yeah, so this would be a good summary then.
That's great.
But yeah.
No, that's great. That's fantastic. It gives the audience a really good context for the rest of the conversation. So you would have seen many different organizations adopting a process-centric approach. Why do some organizations do it well, and why do some organizations not do it well? Is it a matter of those organizations that do it well, they care about it, they understand the importance of it, and the other organizations don't? Or why do we have such a varying degree? I think there are some organizations out there, they're not even doing anything to do with process, or not that they're aware of, at least.
So, leaving out, one lesson you learn in quality management is to leave out the extremes, right? So there are special causes for the extremes. So the people who are completely unaware and the people who are totally aware are actually extremes. Large majority of the companies are in between.
Right.
So there is a spectrum from less aware to significantly aware. So if you look at that spectrum, nobody starts this journey to fail. One fundamental point is that everybody wants to succeed. They want to do well. They come on the process management or business process management bandwagon or the concept, they embrace the concept to succeed. So that is principle one. The more successful ones tend to have clarity and focus. So they don't jump from one concept to another concept every quarter. The difficulty in the less focused ones is that they don't get any major outcomes in 1 or 2 quarters, and then they decide, oh, this is not working. I saw a video of Dan and Anshuman talking about process management. We got all excited. We wanted to implement. We got this consultant, but it's been 2 quarters, man, no change in our profitability. This is useless. So that's the typical, if I summarize, the less aware or the less focused or less clear people. The more clear ones understand that, like every other thing in life, and I'm deliberately using the word life, that because even if you're building a habit, you seem pretty fit, assuming that you run or you go, you go to a gym. You don't see any change. If you start gymming tomorrow, you don't see any change next day. Next week also, you probably are sore and hurting the first week, maybe even second week, maybe even third week. Right? Then slowly you start to feel that I'm enjoying this. I look forward to going to gym or going to my run or whatever other sport you picked. It is exactly the same for process management. The first few days, weeks, months is going to hurt. It is going to hurt. It is like going to the gym or going to start running. If it is not hurting, you are not doing it right. So that is where the smarter fellows know that it is going to hurt. Like every change in life, it won't be easy. People will not believe in it. Senior management will not be believing. They may not pick the right processes. They may pick very complex projects. All that is subset. The main thing is the realization and the mindset that this is going to hurt in the short term.
Right.
And then there will be a time when we will start enjoying it. And after that will come the fruitful period. So I equate always this journey or any change journey with this metaphor of gymming or running or things like that, or any habit formation. This is like an organizational habit. Like individuals build habits, organizations also need time to build habit. In fact, they need longer, obviously, right? So that would be my response to why some succeed and why others can't.
Yeah. Okay. And so obviously you were talking about going through pain at the beginning, but you're not going to the gym. You don't go through the pain if there's not some sort of reward or some sort of fruit, as you were referring to in the long term. So, looking at that fruit, what drives an organization to adopt a process management approach? What are the most common drivers or motivations? Because obviously, as you were saying, when they adopt this approach, they're going to go through pain. It's going to be establishing those organizational habits, but they're doing it so that they can get to some sort of end result that's going to drive them. But what drives them to go through that pain in the beginning?
2-3 things. I think first one will be simplification, right? So over the years, what happens for most organizations is that as they add functions, locations, departments, and maybe products and services, the processes that they have tend to become like band-aids or patchwork. So they are just sticking things up to hold together. And after a while, the whole wall seems like a patchwork, right? So example I can give you, maybe I was once working on a Hong Kong insurance project, and what we found is that over 40% of the customers complained that we are, after having applied for the insurance, and I'm not getting into details, just to keep it simple, we are asked for a payment slip. So when you buy insurance, assuming you are buying at a branch, you will pay your premium, and that premium receipt will be given to you, which you have to hand over to the insurance agent, or the executive, who will then attach it with your application and say, okay, this fellow, Dan, has filled out this application and he's paid the $20 or $40 or whatever is the amount, and here is the receipt. 40% and more customers said that after a week or two, we get a repeat call that, look, your receipt is missing. And we handed it over to this person. Now, where somewhere along the line, earlier, maybe 5 years ago, the process was pretty simple, but because the bank wanted more security, they wanted the receipt. Earlier, they were only checking the debit. Now they want the receipt. As the whole process became a patchwork, this became a critical document. It was not actually critical for the issuance of policy. So if you know insurance, the fact that you have paid, you are covered from day one. Across the world, most policies are like that. But because this piece was missing, suddenly it became an issue. A piece which was not even important to the whole process became a showstopper.
Right, okay.
And this happens to most companies because when they design the process, some seemingly odd small thing becomes important and then becomes a showstopper. Or even if this does not happen, there are many other things can happen, that there are multiple silos of processes. You tend to hand over stuff from one department to another department. So sales will say that I handed over to operations. Operations will say that I am waiting for something from underwriting, and so on. So number one topic for companies, or benefit for companies, what drives this is their need for simplification. It becomes way too complex for them to manage. Customers start saying, this is rubbish. I can't manage this. You don't seem to get your act together. You expect me to give you this kind of stuff, and so on, right? So simplification is one. Second, I think, is simplification and customer experience can be joined to one. The second is cost. So obviously when you, and I'm saying cost in a good way, not in a dirty way, but as you add parts to your process, everybody has to be paid, and therefore you are adding cost to your process. Your process becomes more costly, and by definition it becomes more inefficient because you are putting more money in to get the same value out. In fact, the value also reduces because less and less customers will come to you. So assuming that, you are in Brisbane and we are friends there, you bought a policy from this insurance policy, and we meet up for coffee, and I say, look, I'm looking for a policy. You say, take it from anybody but this bank, right? That will be your response, because it has taken 2 weeks for your simple policy to be delivered, and they have been pestering you with calls to give a receipt, which you have already given.
Yes.
So you will tell me, take it from anybody but this bank or this insurance company.
Yeah.
In a way, and this is the vicious cycle which the companies start facing, that customers start talking about it, less customers sign up. So their process, which they have added cost to, is actually giving even less return.
Yes, okay.
than earlier. So the second is cost. And the third is employees, I would say. So I will put it to three. So customer or simplification, second being cost, and third being employee. And depending on some companies, the order could be different. So I'm not saying customers are more important always than employees, and process is less, and so on. But the order can be different, but these are three. Employees also, because employees start doing overtime. They are frustrated that, they are doing the same thing again and again. And why can't the other department get this stuff right? And I have to redo things. If you, in underwriting, for example, if you, and maybe your audience will know this also, that most underwriting will be valid for a period, right? So, or if you are taking a loan, right, you will get a mortgage loan and it will be valid for 2 weeks. Assuming the process of the mortgage finalization, underwriting, loan drawdown takes 3 weeks.
Right.
The original one is not now applicable because the 2 weeks has crossed. So it has to be redone because the rest of the departments could not close the deal in that much time.
Right.
Now, these are very, very common things. So to summarize for your question, I think simplicity and customer experience, one. And one is like 1, 2, and 3, not like the ranking 1, 2, and 3. Second is cost, and third is employees, because they start doing overtime and get frustrated and are doing much more than required.
Yeah. Now, those three drivers or motivators, that it makes sense. It makes sense to me. I'm sure it makes sense to a lot of organizations, and I would say it makes sense to a lot of the people listening to the episode. What challenges will an organization face when embarking on this process management journey? Because it makes sense, but it doesn't mean that you don't go through that pain to get to the fruit that you're looking for. So what are these challenges that you're seeing most organizations are facing when they're adopting process management?
Before I get there, Dan, I think it's also important to understand the three terms. So business process management, of course, is one phrase, but it is three terms, right? So business is a commercial activity. So we are here to make money. Mm-hmm. We have to understand that. Second is process, which means a series of steps to achieve an outcome. And you can add to this definition, but I'm simplifying. Management is to plan, operate, control, and improve a set of activities, essentially, right? So we are doing all three. So we need a commercial profit angle. We have to have a process, and we have to look at planning, operating, and controlling and improving the whole thing. If you keep all this in mind, your challenges or your difficulties can be in any of these spaces.
Right. Okay.
Right. So from a business point of view, what I normally see is that only the operations team is giving priority to BPM. The sales and the after sales and the other functions, HR and procurement and finance, don't seem to be aligned. Mm-hmm. So lack of organizational alignment is challenge number one.
Right.
Where we find clearly that, or at least in my experience, I've seen that if only operations is going to do business process management, the business part is already out. And the process is also limited. So we are only optimizing a limited process or already a shorter process. What will we get out of it for a customer? Not much, right? So in any typical process improvement or project, we will find that it is best done when it is multifunctional, when it is across functionals. Some years ago, and that was this project was in Australia itself, we were working on some, loan pickup rate. So loan pickup rate is very simply put, your bank has approved the loan, but the customer is yet to pick it up. So what is the percentage of people that pick up the loan within a period? Let's say that period is 1 day. Right? Typically, it is 2 days or a week, but let's, for simplicity, assume it is 1 day, just to keep it simple. We found that less than 20% of the customers were picking up the loan on the same, even though we have already done the hard work of approving and everything.
Wow.
Right. So, which means you as a customer, you applied for the loan, you filled all the documents, we have now approved the loan, but you are now not picking up the loan.
Right.
So for the bank, this is a loss because the money that they could have drawn down in your account would have started earning interest from today.
Yes.
Will now earn interest from a little later.
Right.
Typically what happens, why are you doing this? Because you might have applied to 2 different or 3 different banks.
Okay.
Because you know that, this fellow delays, this fellow delays. So I'll pick up from the one that gives me the fastest. Most people taking personal loans are not worried about the interest rate, but are more worried about the time because they need that loan in a rush. Yeah. I need it today. I can give 0.1% more interest, but I need it today.
Yeah.
If my bank says that I can give it tomorrow or day after, even if you give a discount, it is not very juicy for the customer. So if you see the departments, there is sales, there is communication, marketing, marketing maybe not, but operations, underwriting, everything is put into it. Mm-hmm. For all this to happen within 2 hours of the loan application, all this has to happen.
Yes.
It is not an operations issue.
Yeah, right.
So if the BPM program is running in the operations team department, it will achieve 0, nothing.
Okay.
So when we were doing this project, we made sure that it was a cross-functional team. We made sure that the client executives were reaching out to the customer and saying that if you fill the application by 11 a.m. and give your account details, and if your account details are with our bank, by 5 p.m., you will have the money in your account. So we used to get them to sign the declaration in the application, so that if the loan is approved, the same day it can be drawn down, and my interest meter can start from today, not from tomorrow.
Yes.
So you are more careful now because you are saying this guy is actually quite keen and wants to sign up. So you will probably be more careful in not applying to multiple banks, because you know that these people will do it in a day. So
Yes.
I think organizational alignment is extremely important. This functional alignment. The other is this creating an infrastructure for process management. So nothing happens in a vacuum, Dan. So just by saying this is important, you will probably get attention, but you won't get results. So for example, I'll give you a simple example. Quite a few years ago, I was struggling with improvement projects, and we found that our people were in multiple locations and we could not get updates. And there was too much of this PowerPoint and email culture. So everybody's sending PowerPoints, and after a while, out of sheer frustration, I said, okay, no PowerPoints, no email. I'll make a room. I'll put A2 size sheets, pin them up. So we converted all the three sides. One side we left it with a whiteboard. The three sides of the room with softboard. So, and from top to bottom, up to, of course, a 3 feet distance, we put A2 size paper and made simple Scrum kind of. This was before Agile and Scrum became popular.
Right.
But we just thought of it and said, okay, who are the stakeholders? Who's the process owner? Who's the project owner? What are the things? And we use Post-its like this one to put the tasks. And just kept moving the tasks. And once done, we moved them down. Some years later, I realized that this kind of a room is also called Obeya. And it is, some people call it war room and other stuff. But for us, it was an infrastructural challenge. Right. How do we get all these projects done? So the first one was alignment. The second is infrastructure. And the third is, of course, people. How do you make sure that people remain engaged and interested in this? And look, the one problem I also find is that, how do I put it? Maybe I'm looking for an example for you. Many companies make this mistake of training everybody. Oh, we will now go the BPM way. So we have 10,000 employees, 20,000 employees. Everybody will be BPM trained. That's the biggest nonsense I've heard, because not everybody needs to do this. People have other things to do as well. And we should be able to prioritize. Two examples come to mind. And I'm sorry, I keep giving you these examples and stories, but maybe it will be useful for your audience to bring this to life, right?
Absolutely.
So many years ago, at a steel plant, I was called in as a Six Sigma consultant. And we did our champion program and everything. And then the time had come to start projects. And lo and behold, the senior leadership said that we want to do black belt training. This is senior leadership of a pretty large Indian steel company, one of the bigger names. And I'm aghast. I said, why do you want to do black belt training? No, our MD has said, and MD was in the room as well, and managing director, and that we need to go unless we understand this. So my response again, I pleaded that, look, to understand what is Six Sigma, I can do a one-day workshop for you so that you understand what is your role, how does it work, and so on. A black belt is an intensive 16 to 20 days workshop.
Right.
You will have to go through many, it's good money for me as a consultant. I'm happy to do it. But do you want to do it? Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, Dan, that was probably if I make a list of worst assignments of my entire career till now, this will be top of tops. They could not cross 1 week. And then people started dropping off. It's too tough, man, this is that. And I kept saying that, look, I'm happy to stop this, but you have to tell me because you asked for it, right? So the MD just could not say no. And it was a complete wasteful exercise. Needless to say, they could not start the Six Sigma journey. And even the rest of the people, the message went around that these people couldn't do the black belt program. It's all rubbish. Six Sigma doesn't work, and so on and so forth. And we had to withdraw from that assignment because of this fiasco. I will never forget this, because this was squarely to blame on the over-enthusiasm and misplaced priorities of the senior leadership to learn the details of something. So this, I've seen a few times this in lesser intensity, but this is something that happens a lot, right? So don't train everybody, just pick the right people, let them train. Others can be trained on simple concepts. You don't want to turn the organization into some ninja war factory or something, it's okay. Another example comes from a more recent example of a large global bank. I can't name the bank, who went all agile and scrum. So everybody needs to be agile and scrum trained. This is a bank. Why do you need agile and scrum training for everybody in the bank?
Right.
So it turns out that they said, okay, agile for us is ABC. We just want processes simplified. We don't want this thing. And scrum will be like the war room I explained, that kind of a scrum. So we will have boards and everything. And every employee has to be trained. Every employee will do one project and so on. It is bound to fail then, because every employee does not have the temperament to be an improvement professional. Some people are very good with compliance. Some people are very good with planning. We have to recognize who is good at what and train them accordingly. Why do you want everybody to be trained on something like this? So, so I think alignment, infrastructure, and people will be the response I will have. Long response, but I hope the stories helped.
Absolutely. And I would say that there are people listening to this that when you're talking about alignment, when you're talking about not just one department focused on process, but cross-functionally, different functions have an appetite for process management. I would say that there's a lot of organizations that it is quite siloed in the sense of there's one area that's adopted process management, but it hasn't sort of spread across the organization. How do you do that? How do you, as someone that's working internally at an organization, I'm assuming that it's got to come from the top down. How do you, how do you communicate to your senior leaders that this is important, but we need to do this across the organization, not just in pockets?
Yeah, so I would say, firstly, I don't go with the premise that I have to always convince the senior leadership all the time. Because if I do that, then I'll be waiting for forever. And I'll be blaming senior leadership and saying that because you could not give me the permission, I could not do this.
Okay.
I agree that, senior leadership endorsement is required, support is required. But to say that unless that support comes, I will not do anything is a little bit of a problem I see in process management professionals, where we give importance. Suppose we should give importance to senior leadership commitment, but we give over importance. Senior leadership by design, and I've been in senior roles for some time, and I realize that, there are just too many headaches too much fish to fry. So sometimes it's just not possible for them to pay attention to something like this. And I'm not making this an issue of their capability. They are capable. It is just too complex, and we've not reached their table that way. So firstly, that realization is very important for process management people. You must look for senior leadership support, but don't make it a precondition so harsh that you can't take one step. Right. So it's like people wanting to train for a marathon or 100-kilometer walk or something, and then they want their 2 pairs of Nike jumpsuits, they want new shoes, they want trekking sticks, they want a bag, they want water bottles, everything, before going for a 5-kilometer training trek. Yes, you have to do that 100-kilometer one or a full marathon, but you are going to start with 1-kilometer run or a 2-kilometer or 5 kilometer. You don't need everything for that. Once you get to that, you can buy. Right. So this is only delaying your start. So
Yes.
my view generally is that start where you are, find some quick wins, and then you'll find that there will be always some takers. Latch on to them, make them an example, make them a hero. They will do the selling for you, and more people will join. Eventually, senior leadership will also get a wind of this. Oh, this is fantastic.
Yeah.
This is one way to do it. Of course, if you're lucky and senior leadership is absolutely fully behind this from the day one, fantastic. But that's not 9 out of 10. That's not the case.
Mm.
So you have to go for some quick wins, find some evangelists who will believe in it, solve some problems for some people, uh, solve problems for maybe HR or finance, because HR problems or finance problems or vendor management problems impact a large number of people. When people see that change, they start to think, oh, this thing works.
Yes.
So maybe we can support this. Don't go in for a very specialized solution because nobody will get to know.
Yeah.
So these are a couple of tricks that I have used, and I hope your audience can relate to it. So to summarize, look for quick wins and if some evangelist, and B, find problems with that impact a large number of people, and they will then become your. I'll give you an example. Some years ago, I was in a vendor process improvement program, and the payment process we brought down from about 2 weeks delay to about a day in that. So suddenly the vendors who were very much against us became very pro us. They started offering discounts. And the finance head said that, oh, this is wonderful. These vendors who were not willing to talk to us are offering discounts because now we pay them on time. And this is because of your project that we were delaying them by sometimes 2 weeks, 4 weeks, thinking we are saving money by delaying the payment. I won't name the organization, but there are many organizations which see this, that, when you delay payment, you think you have saved money, but actually you've lost. Because that vendor once the vendor is assured of timely payment, the vendors actually will give you a discount. So this was a project where the impacted people saw some benefit quickly.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's fantastic. Our audience loves these examples and stories of how process management has delivered significant value. And I think coming from 2 weeks down to 1 day, I'm sure there are people listening right now that they want that to happen in their organization. Do you have a couple of other sort of examples or stories you could share of maybe projects you've been part of where you have been able to deliver quite a lot of value to an organization?
Oh, yeah, plenty. Amongst them. So I think I mentioned one early on about this Hong Kong insurance one. So I'll complete that story maybe. So what was happening is, of course, the part where I told you is that the receipt for the premium payment was not attached, and therefore, this whole went into a tailspin. Now, we looked at the whole process, spoke to sales, spoke to some customers, looked at processes of other organizations. I actually posed as a dummy customer to several other leading insurance companies in Hong Kong. And eventually, we were able to rejig the process, and we took an undertaking from the customer that we can debit your account once the policy is underwritten. If the policy is not approved, your account will not be debited. And this underwriting or this statement will only be valid for 1 more week. So they are at peace. If for some reason the policy is not approved or not granted, then their money is not deducted. So what happened? We took out the receipt part completely from the process. So 40% of customers who said that we are being chased down for the receipt, complete zero in one process change. And this was not even a technology change, no change, nothing required. Just a simple format change where we asked them to sign for this, that if the policy is approved, I authorize the bank to deduct payment from my account.
Right.
So a simple change. But this simple change was possible because we were doing a virtual Gemba. We were actually, virtual Gemba doesn't mean anything, but virtual as in, we were pretending to flow with the application form. So we decided to become the application form and then see what happens. And we charted the whole thing. And we discovered that there was a gap loophole here, which can be fixed quite easily without technology. So this was one example where, and this had millions and millions of benefit, because the benefit is mind-boggling in this, because suddenly we were number in 6 not 6 months, about a year, we went from number 3 in the insurance market to number 1. Of course, there were other categories as well, but huge benefits. So this was one. The other was in Canada, where there were quite a few, but this one so Premier customers for a card, when you sign up for a credit card, a Premier credit card, you get a welcome kit and so on. But there are certain conditions to be a banking customer of that particular Premier category. By law in Canada, if Daniel applies for a Premier card or a banking account, he cannot be denied. Right? So the bank spends a lot of money, $500 and more, to welcome you, give you some discounts, freebies, welcome kit, and lots of other stuff, and other discounts. And the only condition of that whole thing kind of account is that you will be investing about $100,000 in the next 6 months.
Right. Okay.
Now, I'm making some numbers. I'm changing some numbers just to protect the confidentiality of the whole process. But the story is the same. What we discovered is that over half these customers never fulfilled the investment requirement, but they continue to enjoy the benefits of the card or the banking account. As per law, you cannot deny a customer the account as per the local laws. We looked at the whole process. This was a huge drain on the bank because we are losing money and we continue to lose money. So the bleeding continues. So we looked at the whole process and we asked a simple question. We cannot deny, but can we not withdraw? If you don't meet the condition, we can certainly withdraw. So we checked with the legal team, with the government regulation, and there was no provision to stop the withdrawal.
Right.
So a simple change where while regulation meant that we could not deny, but there was no regulation on withdrawal. So after a certain period, we would say that here is the first warning. You have not made the mandatory investment for which is required. And hence, after 3 months, we will withdraw. This seems a simple intervention, but from a process management point of view, it was a huge thing because it was in a highly regulated industry, highly regulated and customer-friendly country like Canada, where almost all laws are heavily loaded in favor of the customer, which is fine. That's I give that to them. It is their choice to run the country, but it was leading to a huge loss for the whole process. So there are many, many such examples, but there are some interesting non-starters also, which if you have time, maybe I'll
yeah, absolutely.
So, look, this is where I keep saying that process management is more about Gemba and conversation. So, are you visiting the spot, or are you living the process, and are you talking to people? Don't do it on PowerPoint and Visio and email, right? So, go to the spot, see what is happening. So, very early in not very early, actually, maybe about 10 years ago, 8-9 years ago, I was a consultant to a manufacturing plant in Thailand. And this is just outside of Thailand. So outside of Bangkok, the plant, and it's a chemical plant. So we were one of the projects in the first wave of Six Sigma projects, and they didn't call it Six Sigma because they didn't want to scare people away. So they called it some process improvement drive or something. I don't remember exactly, but they called it a process improvement. But fine. So we followed the process management principles, looked at all the processes and issues, and asked the senior leadership. And then my typical thing that, okay, let's look for some quick wins and also look for projects which will impact a lot of people. One hand went up. They said that, okay, in the packaging department, because these are chemical pellets, when they're packed, there's a lot of dust. So when you pack something into a sack, like a gunny bag, even though the packaging is mechanized, the people who are holding the bag and around surrounding people get a lot of this dust, and it causes them breathing problems and asthma, and some have to be admitted, and some can't work after 2-3 years, and so on.
Wow. Yeah.
So, or they have to be shifted to other departments to recover, right? And so on, right? So, in some countries, this is even illegal because you can't subject your workforce to this. But it wasn't so in this plant. But it was still a concern. So we said, fantastic, this is a very nice project, we'll take it up. My job was to go every month for a few days to review the state of projects. We did the training, we identified project managers, everything. 3 visits down, this project was not moving. Other projects were moving. So I went into a little deep review. And eventually I could not get an answer. I said, okay, fine. Where is this place? Oh, it is in the same plant that we are sitting. Oh, fantastic. Let's go there. What do you mean go there? No, let's go there. I mean, we'll see. Okay, so we got a factory hat and mask and everything and all that, and went there. And as we reached there, we find that the area is spick and span clean. I mean, I could eat off the floor. So I said, what were you even talking? Oh no, this used to be very dirty and very heavily polluted and everything. So then we got into a little bit, and long story short is that the manager who had proposed this project used to be the manager of that department 5 years ago. And 5 years ago, this problem was a heavy. Over the 5 years, workers and supervisors of the unit had done small improvements in projects, and the problem was almost zero now.
Right.
So this is the power of Gemba. Had we done Gemba in the first instance and gone and seen the place, we would not have selected this problem, right? So this project would not have happened. So another one, now that you prompted me for some stories, another one is so we had this function in a bank where customers were in the Middle East, and all customers had to renew their credentials every year. And we found that function which was approving their renewed credentials had a 90% backlog. 90% backlog means at any given point in time, whatever they were doing, they still had almost 90% of that in backlog. And what credential approval should take a day or two was taking weeks. And customers were complaining that I just gave you my passport photocopy 2 weeks back. Now you're asking for it again. So there was huge unrest. So we looked at the whole process. We found that the scanned copies which are coming into India at the center, the processing center, were actually very faint. So your passport copy is scanned, and it was being scanned at the branch in Middle East. I'm trying to avoid the names of the countries because not correct. It's got nothing to do with the country or nothing to do with the bank. It's the process, right? So the photocopies were very bleak and faint. So obviously the person who is reviewing cannot read it and type it. If he or she cannot read it, he or she cannot validate it. So it goes into a backlog. And it became so serious that, this whole function would probably be shut down, or we'll have to do something very expensive to get out of the problem. So I sent 2 people to the branch office in the Middle East country where we were operating from India. I finally figured out that we can't solve this problem in email. You will not believe, Dan, what was the problem? The problem was that some smart person in the IT department had come down to the photocopying machine and said that, oh, this is set at very high resolution. Why do we need a photocopy of such high resolution? We can do it to the lowest. Obviously, when you do the lowest, the photocopy is not clear. It is wired back to India. Nobody can read it. Therefore, the whole process is repeated multiple times. And the trouble is that even when the customer comes back to give the original passport or the identity document, it is still photocopied on the same machine. So again, it is not clear. And this whole merry-go-round continues. All we needed was to change the setting to medium, problem solved.
Yes, right.
Problem solved only because you walked the process, you understood the whole thing as a process, and figured out that till the time you keep getting faint copies of the passport, this problem will not solve. Any number of interventions you do at the people end, at the systems end, anything you do, nothing is going to work because the input is faulty. How do you fix the input? You go to the source. So when you go to the source, one click of the button and problem solved from next day, same day.
Yeah.
Because the photocopies were now clear. Problem solved. So there are many such in a long career, many such process management things. And I try to bring to you only the ones which did not need much technology.
Yes.
Because once you get into technology, then maybe people start to believe that, this works only with technology and I don't have the money for technology and so on. But you don't need all that money. You need some skills to go and see, do Gemba and have conversations. Speak to people who are in the process. They will tell you. So these were some of the additional ones. Yeah.
No, that's great. And obviously you've seen the process landscape adapt and evolve over time. It sounds like obviously there are some core fundamentals that have stayed the same over the years. But when you look at the future now and the trends that you're noticing and how organizations are adopting process management moving forward, what are you seeing? Obviously, there's there is a lot of technology and there's a lot of hype around different technologies. You've got robotic process automation, you've got process mining, you've got all of these different technologies. But technology aside, what does the future of business process management look like from your perspective?
So, two major responses. One, I do think that we can no longer say that technology is not important. The last 2-3 years, because of the pandemic, has shown us that the world will remain fragmented, distant, teams will be working remotely, and this will remain the future model for the foreseeable future. I mean, of course, hybrid work and other concepts will be there, but this will remain a thing that we will see. So we have to find a solution within this. So this is one major area where technology can help, where, even whiteboarding technologies like Miro or Miro, as some people call it, and other similar technologies could be very useful. Because we will need to collaborate online a lot more than we used to. Right? So technology is extremely important. And coming to the technologies that you mentioned, process mining will become extremely important. It's already very important because a good process mining software can run incognito. You don't need any intervention. People, there are, for example, there is this active operations soft suite. There are other suites of tools which can run and tell you a very good picture of how your process is operating. This is equivalent of you going and walking the process and doing the Gemba. I still think that you should do the Gemba, but you will start with a process mining document, which will have told you that how is the process moving, where are the pitfalls, what is happening. So technology is extremely important. I have, even though much of the conversation we've had, I have tried to give you examples of non-technology or interventions, but that was more because I wanted to convince the audience that this is for real. It does not always need technology. As things stand today and in the future, we cannot, I would say, ignore technology. Extremely important. RPA, robotic process automation, intelligent automation, other forms of all this stuff, some elements of AI and ML are already there. So particularly for service organizations, this is not the future. This is the present.
Right.
If we cannot embrace it and we cannot adopt it, we will be left behind. As process management people, our field will go into the hands of the people who are running the technology. And then 3 years down the line, 5 years down the line, we'll say, oh, but there are no new jobs in process management. Oh, but this and that. That's because we fail to embrace the new technology. So I think that will be number one force. And number two, like I said even earlier, which is part of the one itself, is that this distributed workforce and remote working and all will be a bigger challenge than what we think. Everybody likes work from home, but work from home is not extremely conducive to collaboration when you're trying to solve a problem, to brainstorming. So we'll have to find ways to engage an audience or a small team into a virtual environment where we can solve these problems. I mean, I've tried that, but I think this is a very, very big issue for the future because it's not going away. So we need a solution. And I've not yet found a 100% solution for this. The first one, yes, the RPA process mining, that is clear, no-brainer. The second one is people-related and very complex, I would say. So the other part, Dan, I think is also important is that quite a few people approach process management as a software solution. And the analogy I give always is that, look, you need to understand how the process works, how it operates, and the analogy is of a calculator. So you can of course do your complex maths on your calculator, but if you don't know how the maths is being done, the calculator will fail you one day because you won't understand what it is doing, because it can of course do the calculation fast, but if you don't understand how it is doing the simple maths behind it, the multiplication, subtraction, division, addition and so on, that part is extremely important. So people who are starting their career in process management with software should invest some time in actually seeing a process, walking the process, working with the process, rather than straight away getting into a process management software, because forever then they'll only know how to work on a calculator. They won't know how to work the maths.
Yes.
So these 2-3 things, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And for the community that has been listening to this episode, obviously we've touched on a range of different topics to do with process management. You've been sharing a lot of fantastic examples and stories, and I'm sure that it's piqued the interest of those that maybe they're at a lower level of process maturity in their organization, and they're looking at ways to how can we take the organization to that next level, to that next step. And you've given them some great ideas, but where do they go now to learn more? Is it a matter of continuing a conversation with experts like yourself? Is it about reading books? Is it about doing courses? Where should these people go to continue their education on process management?
I think that answer is simple. That all of this and more, because learning and education has become so complex that the main challenge today is curation. Information is available. What should I read is the bigger question than where is the material. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was, I don't have enough material on this. Where is the material? There would be simple text on everything and you could read up. But now there's so much information on every subject that your ability to curate or select is probably the more defining activity. The other ability is to learn something very quickly. So how do you learn something quickly? Because in many jobs, there won't be any space and time for you to take years to learn a new skill. You may only have weeks to learn enough.
Right.
So these two are important areas. But to answer the question specifically, I still think the works of people like Michael Hammer in the area of process management are extremely important. He, of course, sadly is not with us anymore, passed away some years ago, but his works and books like The Agenda, where, it is a very, very innocuous, simple book, but it explains process management without using the word process management. And, then, of course, his last co-authored book, Faster, Better, Smarter. It's also an awesome book, of course, written with a co-author who completed the work after he passed away. But some of that kind of work, and look, even more classical works of Juran and Deming still are applicable, particularly Juran, because he talked a lot more about process management. And in the new one, I would strongly urge your audience to look at adjoining areas. I always believe that maximum growth happens when you look at adjoining areas. What are the adjacent areas? So don't look at process management as a closed box where once you are in it, you can't or you should not look out. You should look out. And things like Hoshin Kanri, things like OKR, or what is called objectives and key results. It's like Obeya. If you study all this, your implementation of process management becomes stronger. So I would strongly urge that apart from strengthening your basics and going through the texts and videos or channels like yourselves, you've spoken to more than 100 professionals in this space, totally a wealth of information, right? So, and there will be other such resources as well. So take advantage of this, but intentionally widen your horizon to look at adjacent spaces. So things like Hoshin, Obeya, OKR, learn about all these things and try and integrate this. Don't think of it as a separate thing. So one fascination with people who are in a stream of like any stream, like, I mean, even in medicine, cardiologists will see all the problem as a heart problem only. A neurosurgeon sees every problem as a nerve-related problem, but it could be a combination of faculties.
Right.
So it is perfectly possible what you think is a process problem is actually a people problem.
Right, okay.
Or what you think is a process problem is a system problem. If you don't have awareness or knowledge of these adjoining spaces, you will make a very poor diagnosis. If you make a poor diagnosis, your medicine or the treatment will be faulty.
Yes. That's great.
So that's something I will give you.
That's good. That's really good. Well, Anshuman, I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation today. Obviously, we can only scrape the surface of a number of different areas, but I know that the audience will have gleaned a lot from you today. And for those that are listening to this, Anshuman is more than happy to connect with you over LinkedIn. If you have any follow-up conversations from this episode, please reach out to him. He's more than happy to answer those questions for you. But Anshuman, I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this chat today.
My pleasure, Dan. It was a total pleasure narrating some stories. And of course, it's always good to share with the like-minded audience like you have. So all the best to your series, and looking forward to talking to you again someday. Fantastic.